Hey everybody, how you doing? Kev here. So today I'm going to do not so much a rig rundown, just more sort of a pedal board rundown. Pedal board right here. I've put a lot of new stuff on my pedal board lately. It's kind of the biggest change I've seen in it in years, actually. So I just thought this might be a good idea for my guitar students, so I could explain what's going on, explain some of my ideas and thought processes and decisions that I made along the way, as much as a learning experience for them and to generate questions and discussion. So that's really what I'm doing this. And of course, it's fun for me to do it too. I like doing this stuff. So, I mean, who doesn't want to do their own rig rundown? Come on, we all do. So that's what I'm going to do. Before we start, I just want to talk to you briefly about the power supply. Power supply, you see, this is my power supply here, right? Currently, the way things are working in the guitar world, we have a lot of digital processing going on in our effects pedals, which is very cool. But some of those effects pedals have pretty high-powered digital processors, and those digital processors can introduce some noise back into the power line, which can go into other pedals and then create noise problems in our signal, which we don't want. The way of dealing with that currently is an isolated output power supply, okay? And that's what I've got here. An isolated output power supply, all right? In the old days, we used to use a single power supply and what we call the daisy chain cable, which would connect the power inputs of multiple pedals, all in one go, and they would all be connected to a single outlet. But that doesn't work anymore because some pedals, like this guy, for example, big digital processor in there, can send noise back along the power line, and that can come out on some of the other pedals, especially when we engage overdrive or distortion. So isolated output power supply helps us solve that problem, okay? But you'll notice here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pedals on my board, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 outlets being used on my power supply. The reason for that is that this one, and this one are still good old-fashioned analog pedals, okay? And they're very low power consumption. And they can happily still be daisy chained, which is what I have done. So I have 3 pedals on a single outlet, and all the other digital pedals get their own power outlet. So that's how I've done the power, okay? All right, so having done that, now I'm gonna switch to, I'm gonna put the pedal board on the desk. I'm gonna show you what I'm running through here. This is Julia. Say hello, Julia. Julia is my Music Man Cutlass. On the wall behind us there, watching and casting their lovely eyes, will be Michelle. And this is Ruby in the corner. I'm running through my Yamaha THR5 on my desk, which I have set to the modern channel on a very low gain sound as an almost clean tone. That's how I usually run it all the time. I'm going to be recording directly into Reaper. When I'm done, I'll probably do a little bit of post-processing just to edit out some of the mistakes and glitches and blah, 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 and just to equalize the volumes on the guitar takes. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. All right, enjoy. See you in a while. Good. Hi, everybody. All right, so here we go. First, let's talk about, well, we just talked about the power supply, right? Okay, so next, I want to mention these things. Come out. There we go. These things. Some people call them mushrooms. They're little, actually, they're called toppers, I think. These are toppers. These go on the buttons of your foot switches. If you spend a lot of time, there we go. If you spend a lot of time with your stocking or bare feet, they make your foot switches an awful lot more comfortable to push. And I love them, and I put them on all my pedals. Except for the tap tempo on this guy. I don't know why, but I prefer it that way. On the right, we're moving mostly from right to left. On the right, this is the cable from the guitar, which goes into my tuner, which is a TC Electronic PolyTune. Okay, it doesn't really matter which tuner you have, but you need to have one. That's the most important thing, okay? Everybody should have a tuner. All right, I particularly like the PolyTune. In the strobe mode, it's more accurate than your ears can possibly hear. In the strobe mode, we have a pattern of lights. If the pattern is moving to the left, your note is flat. If the pattern is moving to the right, your note is sharp. And if the pattern is stationary, you're in tune, okay? So let me show you what that looks like. So let's test my low E string, for example. So there's my low E string. The pattern is clearly moving to the left. In fact, it's almost a D sharp. There we go. And now I'm coming up to pitch. The pattern slows down, and then we're stationary and we're in tune. And then I can go sharp, and I'll take it back to pitch again. All right, so that's my tuner. Traditionally, we like to put the tuner at the front of the pedal chain. Simply because we like to have the tuner receive the signal direct from the guitar without any effects on it, because that could confuse the tuner. Having said that, feel free to put the tuner anywhere you like. It's all good. Okay, from the PolyTune, the first pedal I go into is this guy. This is a cunningly disguised NuX Monterey Vibe, which is a univibe effect. Univibe, is it a vibrato? No. Is it a chorus? No. Is it a phaser? No, it's univibe. It's its own thing. Is it a rotary speaker sound? No, it's not that either. It's just univibe. The old legend was that the univibe effect was the Shinai company in Japan in the 1960s trying to get the sound of the Leslie rotating speaker cabinet. And they failed, but they created a wonderful univibe instead. We've recently learned that the inventor of univibe loved listening to shortwave radio as a child, and anybody that has listened to shortwave radio will remember how stations would swell in and out and how interference between stations could produce all kinds of weird effects. And yes, the univibe is definitely what that does. For me, I grew up with a theater organ in my living room. My dad made a theater organ from a kit in the 1960s, and we had 3 large speaker cabinets that were furniture in our house. One of those speaker cabinets was a Leslie cabinet, so I know what the guitar sounds like through a Leslie cabinet. And as it turns out, through most of the 1980s, I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours lying on the floor of my bedroom with my shortwave radio logging stations from all over the world. I know what shortwave radio sounds like. Univibe sounds like shortwave radio. So let's have a listen. Clean tone first, okay? All right, so there's my clean tone. This, ladies and gentlemen, is univibe. I love univibe. I particularly like it with a little bit of overdrive. Wait till you hear this. I love univibe. Oh, do I love univibe. It's great. This pedal, incidentally, also has a wonderful little trick, which is tap tempo. That's the speed of the wobble, just by tapping on the Footswitch. It also has a wonderful trick, which is if I hold the Footswitch down, the LED turns yellow, and now, or is that green? Who knows? And now I have a classic vibrato effect, which I really like, especially when you put a little bit of echo on there with it too. Very cool. There we go. So that's my univibe pedal. All right. I have decided that I like univibe to be the first thing in my effects chain. In other words, well, not necessarily the first thing, but certainly in front of my overdrive or distortion sounds. You get a very different result when univibe goes after your overdrive or distortion sounds. And that's true of many, many things. Pedal order is not fixed. There's no right or wrong way to do it. The way I've set things up is kind of the traditional thing where overdrives tend to go in front of delay and reverb. So For example, what we're hearing reverberations on is the distorted guitar tone if I'm using one of my overdrive pedals, okay? If I place the reverb earlier in the effects chain, we are also distorting the reverb, and that gives us a different result. It reacts and feels differently. And it can be interesting. For me, I prefer it this way. What can I tell you? I'm a physicist. And I prefer things to be the way I think of them in real life in many respects. So for me, I like to hear my delay go into my reverb first, and I like to hear anything else to my signal happening before that. But that's just me. That's just my personal opinion, and you don't have to do anything like that if you don't want to. So feel free to try it. If you have discrete effects like this, you can put them in any order you like. If you have a multi-effects unit, you may be able to change the order of the effects, and that is a useful thing to do. If you were wondering, why on earth would you want to do that? Well, that's why. You get a different result. Univibe after distortion or overdrive gives you a different sound. Next pedal. I love this guy. Radial Engineering. Made in Canada. Radial are a fantastic Canadian company. Studio engineers know Radial gear very, very well. They make fantastic studio gear. And somewhere around the early 2000s, I think, Radial started making a series of pedals for guitar players. Okay? This is one of those pedals. They were called the Tone Bone series. It'll do high gain, modern high gain sounds, but I particularly use it as a low gain sound that sort of models. I like to think of something like a Fender Deluxe Reverb or Twin Reverb cranked up. Okay? It has two foot switches. One is the on and off switch, and the second one introduces channel 2. Channel 2 here is basically the same as channel 1, but I can dial in a volume boost or cut if I want, and it thickens up some of the mid-range a little bit too. So let's have a listen to that, okay? First, clean tone. I'm going to go bridge pickup here. All right. And with the volume boost. Very cool. I love that pedal. Now, the reason I have it at this position in the chain, I could have put it anywhere, of course, but this is almost, I'm going to call it a neutral sound. I don't like using the word transparent because it's not really. But what I like about this is I can use this to push these two pedals or the amplifier a little bit harder. Okay? Okay, from the Radial, we move into the Mooer Green Mile. This is a clone, in fact, a direct copy of the Ibanez Tube Screamer, the TS9. I know because I have a TS9 and I've checked them side by side. The only difference here, the taper on the level control is a little bit different. In other words, I have to set this knob in a slightly different position compared to the TS9 to get the same change in volume. All right? What happens here, there's a heavy cut of the bass frequencies, then it goes into the clipping part of the circuit, and then from there, there's a high frequency cut, which is adjusted by the tone control. Let's have a listen to this. This is the classic sound. For me, I grew up on Stevie Ray Vaughan, who's my biggest guitar hero when I was in my earliest years. In the more modern age, John Mayer is the guy that people will think of. But the Tube Screamer has been used by so many thousands and thousands of the top players over the last 35, 40 years. It's quite crazy. So. So that's the Tube Screamer. As I said, let's compare it back to the Radial bones, okay? Very different sounds there, right? Very different sounds. It's a unique flavor. As I said, a lot of people think of this as a blues pedal, but let's not relegate it to that because it does a lovely trick when we put it in combination with something like this guy. Let's move on, and we'll come back to that little combination deal in a second. The Suhr Riot. John Suhr is an American guitar maker, an amplifier maker, and effects pedal maker. He's been making the most amazing guitars for a very, very long time. And all of his gear is incredible high quality. This is a high-ish gain distortion pedal, which is kind of modeled on the sound of a high-gain Marshall amplifier. There's a mode switch here on the top. I have it running on the left-hand side, which is more of a vintage sound. It's a little thicker in the mids and a little softer and smoother on the highs. It's a great sounding pedal, and it does a very cool trick, which I'm about to show you. All right, first, let's just listen to the pedal on its own. I love this pedal. It's awesome. Very, very cool. One of the things that I particularly like about this pedal is that it does something a lot of other distortion pedals don't seem to manage. With some of them, if you turn the distortion up past a certain level, you tend to lose the definition of the different pickup combinations on your guitar. But I find that this pedal manages to maintain those tonal distinctions quite clearly for quite a long time. And I love it. It's one of my favorite things about this pedal. It's what I think it really makes it stand apart in a market crowded with amazing Marshall in a box sound distortion pedals. So let's just have a quick run through here. Here's my bridge pickup. All right, the next pickup selection is full bridge humbucker with the middle pickup together. All right, the next position is bridge pickup with the neck pickup. Next one is middle and neck pickup. And finally, the neck pickup on its own. A very, very cool pedal. It goes up to crazy levels of high gain as well, which is great for chugging on that low E string. Very cool. Now, here's the lovely trick. A tube screamer in front of a lot of distortion like a pedal like this. That low cut on the tube screamer and the high cut on the tube screamer with its mid push actually gives extra clarity to this while increasing the distortion. One of the things I particularly like about the mini pedals is how close I can put them together. And part of that is because I got so used to working with the Radial pedals. This spacing of 2 buttons is very cool because it's easy enough to switch any one of them on and off when you need to, especially with a large foot. You can do it, you know, but if you need to, you can also do both of them at the same time. Because then, for example, as I have here, I have set on channel 1 a lower volume level. On channel 2, I have a volume boost, right? But that means that I can go, for example, from this state where I have clean signal going through and the toggle switch hasn't been engaged yet. I can hit with one foot and they both go on. And that's very cool. With mini pedals, I can get them close enough together that I can do exactly the same thing. So I've set these two up as a pair, you know? So I can go from a completely clean tone to hitting them both with my foot in one go and get that. Or, alternately, I can go from blues sound, hit both pedals at the same time with one foot, and now get a higher gain rock sound. Okay, so there we go. That's why I have those two together. This whole idea of mixing different combinations of overdrive pedals is called stacking. And one thing to note is that if I have a volume boost that comes after everything else in the chain, it makes everything else louder. If I have a volume boost going into something that's distorted, the more distorted this is, the less the volume boost will affect it. But the volume boost will introduce more distortion. So that's interesting to play around with and see what works for you. There's a ton of great videos out there on stacking gain pedals, so it's something to look into. Okay, moving on from there. This is my delay pedal, the Alexander Effects History Lesson Volume 3. I really am very impressed with this pedal. It sounds fantastic. It has 6 different styles of delay. This is why it's called a history lesson, because it kind of goes back to the history of guitar effects. Really, the first real effect on a guitar, to my mind, was a very short slapback echo from a tape unit placed inside a guitar amplifier, you know, and that would actually sound something like this. Slapback. That was really the very first electric guitar effect. And over the years, people made slightly more complicated devices, again using tapes. This is what's called a tape echo sound right now. Tape was really pretty hi-fi, or could be if you wanted it to be. But some of the tape units didn't do that. Kind of like these guys, some of them had a little roll off on the low frequencies so things didn't get too muddy, and rolls off in the high frequencies too. And that can produce a sort of mid-range focus to the repeats. So let's have a listen to that. I'm going to make the delay time longer, turn the repeats up. So let's have a listen to how the repeats sound, okay? First, here's the clean tone. All right, now listen to the repeats. And that's a cool sound. I really like that. One of the other things about tape as well is that tape never runs at a perfectly consistent speed. And that means that the playback can vary in pitch just a tiny, tiny amount. We don't normally notice it if it's a single source, but here we have 2 sources. One source is my guitar sound, and the second source is the echoes itself. So if I turn up the modulation here, you get a feel for what that sounds like. It really adds something kind of magical to the sound. So again, clean guitar tone. Very nice sound. All right. This pedal also has tap tempo, so I can set the length of time between the repeats by just tapping on the pedal. It's a really great pedal, and I really should do a review of it one day. Okay. Moving swiftly on, I like to hear my echoes go into the reverb rather than have the reverberated sound echoed. Again, it's subtle sometimes, but yeah, there is a difference in what happens there. So for me, delay goes into reverb. Reverb is usually the last thing in the effects chain for me. All right, so this is the MXR M300 Reverb. It has 6 different reverb styles in there. Again, they're sort of looking back at different types of reverb sound. First one that we've been hearing is the room sound. Let me turn the mix up on that so you get to hear it. So dry sound all on its own. So you can hear electric guitar completely dry is a little too dry. It's a little too little too in your face. It's just a bit dead, really. And when we think of an acoustic guitar has resonance. You know, there's a hollow body there, which is a big box that has air moving. Even when we stop the strings, that air continues to move for a little bit of time. And it helps to smooth out the sound a little bit. And of course, we also have sympathetic vibrations in an acoustic guitar, which become a little bit more apparent, I think, because of the hollow body. That doesn't necessarily apply to the electric guitar so much. So a completely dry electric guitar sound, a little odd to hear sometimes. So adding a little bit of reverb to it can really help. All right, so here's a room sound. Okay, nice and easy. I can adjust how big the room sounds or how many hard surfaces there are in the room. Useful. So that's a nice reproduction of a room sound. The other ones that we generally hear of in terms of technology for reverbs are the plate reverb and the spring reverb. The plate reverbs came around sometime around the end of the 50s, early 60s, if I recall correctly. And it literally was a great big sheet of metal, you know, about 1/8 of an inch thick, weighed a lot. They were really heavy. And that was suspended on a frame with springs. And then there were transducers attached to the metal plate. One transducer would take the sound that went in and produce a vibration in the plate. And if you've ever taken a sheet of metal and wobbled it, well, you kind of know what that sounds like. It's not what a plate sounds like, but my point is that vibrations can travel across the plate very quickly. And those vibrations echo around inside the plate and then are picked up by the output transducer. So let's have a listen to a plate reverb. It's a very smooth sound. It's quite bright, although I can tailor it too here. So that's the plate reverb. Now, the spring is the reason I bought this pedal. Let me tell you about spring reverbs. Spring reverbs started appearing in guitar amplifiers. The earliest one, there were a lot of early ones actually, but one that was most famous was an outboard unit. It wasn't built into the amplifier yet. It was made by Fender. It was called the 6G15 outboard reverb unit. And it was a big box, about this size actually. And it had springs stretched across the bottom of the box, basically. Again, with a little transducer. So the sound from your guitar would go in and hit the springs. And the sound would bounce up and down the springs and then come out the other side. And that box went in front of an amplifier. An outboard Fender spring unit tended to have a short decay and a very bright sound. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like now. And that really became kind of synonymous, thanks to a man called Dick Dale, with the sound of surf rock. So that's one style of spring. The other style of spring reverb for me is the sound of reverb that we get in an old Fender amplifier, what we called the blackface Fender amplifiers, which first came out around 64. And that's a warmer sound with a longer tail. And this pedal does a great job of reproducing that sound. So I'm just going to give a quick bang here onto the guitar, and I want you to listen to the sound of the trail as the reverb dies away, okay? You'll hear the flutter from the springs. This pedal does such a great job of capturing that sound. It's really awesome. I have listened to so many spring reverbs over the years, partly because I was so unhappy with the spring sound in my old TC Electronic pedal. The Hall of Fame does some wonderful reverb sounds, don't get me wrong, but I always thought it sucked at doing springs. It just didn't do it well enough for me. This pedal, for me, nails it. It's exactly what I want to hear. Fabulous. Love it to pieces. All right, the last step in the chain for me is the Ditto looper. A looper is such a great teaching tool. I've used it in a lot of my lessons, but it's also a great practice tool at home. And the reason I put the Ditto looper at the end of the chain is that it allows me to loop any combinations of these that I like and then use a different combination to play over it. Okay? I'll give you a little taste of that right now. Right, so there we go. The last thing I would like to mention to you about this is that my approach like this with a fairly clean, although not totally clean amplifier, and getting most of my overdrive and dirt sounds from the pedals is because it gives me maximum flexibility. And that has always been necessary for me since I started gigging in 2001, I guess. Yeah, it was 2001. 20 years ago. Oh my goodness. Since I started then, I needed a broad palette of sounds, usually in the same gig. You know, clean tones had to be pretty clean. Everything else came from pedals because it gave me maximum flexibility, you know? So that's still my approach today. I do have a couple of great guitar player friends of mine who say to me, "Hey man, why aren't you just going straight into the amp with one cable? You know, you could do everything." And I'm like, I mean, yeah, it's nice and flattering and all, but no, that's not what my job is. My job as a guitar player is to be somebody else's number two guy, somebody else's sideman. If I was producing my own music, my own songs, my own gig, maybe then I might change things a little bit because I could do anything I wanted. But in this case, no, I need a broad palette, and I've been doing this for so long, this is just the way I do things now. So there you go. Right. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section. Get in touch. You know how to do it. All right. Take care of yourselves out there, everybody. Wash your hands, wear a mask, get your vaccines as soon as you can, all right? And until everyone's vaccinated, just take care, okay? We're not out of the woods yet. It's going to take a little while longer. We just got to try and be patient. I know how hard it is, believe me. I know how hard it is, all right? Okay, folks, take care. Ciao, bye-bye, so long, love y'all.